Thank you. Thank you very much. I want to know what you guys in Bishop's thought for drinking your coffee, you know. You're the most awake people I've ever been with on a Saturday morning. It's like incredible. Such hunger. It is probably because this was a brewery once. Is that what it is? There's sort of, it's like the resident anointing of the, yeah. Well, it actually feels great to be here. I feel more awake than I probably should be, but thank you for that. And yeah. The biggest challenge when I travel is what not to say, really, because I have a lot to say and a lot of different subjects. Let me just start somewhere. Is that you who just led worship? You just changed your shirt, your jumper. That's all right. Don't worry about the banana. Carry on eating. You've just been working. I walked in and I don't know that I've ever had this experience before, but the Lord said it's the year of the peacock. I saw your peacock. He said it's the year of the peacock. So that's very strange. So I looked up peacock. I thought, well, I haven't got a clue what a peacock stands for. Does anyone know? So, and then I checked to make sure it's in the Bible, because I didn't want a year of something that wasn't in the Bible. It's in the Bible. Solomon had peacock, so we're good, we're okay. Then I realized that, because I learned from Bill that God speaks in unusual circumstances, divine coincidences. That's how he often speaks, the language of the Spirit, which is in one of Bill's books. And I looked it up, and it says vision, awakening, and royalty. I'll take that. That's a good year. So anyway, so I saw that, but then the Lord started to kind of unfold a couple of things about you. I felt like the Lord said that nobody else necessarily knows this, but you feel like you live life with an impediment, with a flaw. I don't know whether that's true or not. I don't know what it is. It doesn't matter. But I felt like no one else knows. But the flaw is about to become, this is a weird way of saying it, but the flaw of your life, what you think is an impediment, is about to become the tour guide's umbrella. And you're going to hold up a tour guide's umbrella, and in the kingdom, you're going to lead people with the tour guide's umbrella. And what you thought was your weakness, what you thought was your impediment, is actually going to become, because it isn't anyway, it isn't a problem, but it's going to become your greatest strength. And the peacock thing is part of it. The peacock jumper, sweater, whatever they're called, because they're not jumpers in America, but anyway, they're kangaroos or something in Australia. But it's actually part of it. The fact that you wore it today is somehow symbolic of what you're going to represent, what you're going to lead people into. And there's probably loads more, and I'm sure I'll read more and look at it now. But I'll take vision. We need vision. I'll take royalty. But the other word was awakening. And I think there's something on that. I think it's something on your life. Anyway, so we've had years of owls and stuff. Chris was going after owls a few years ago. I never quite got the owl thing, to be perfectly honest. But I loved the messages, but I think there's something about that. And then I worked in a prison that had peacocks running all over the place and all sorts of stuff. So anyway, that by way of introduction. Me, quick headlines of me, just because you said that you wanted me to say who I am, in case you have no clue who I am. I was saved in 1973 by my dad's dead body, February the 28th, 1973. Gave my life to the Lord. And I was called to the ministry in 1975. Know that I know that I was called to what I would now call career ministry. I hate the phrase full-time ministry with a passion these days. And as a result of that, Sue's grandfather, who Sue would become my wife, but she wasn't my wife when he wrote to me and told me to go and get some experience working with people. So I did that, and I trained as a psychiatric and general nurse, trained at the Royal London Hospital, the best hospital in the world. I'm biased, but it's true. And spent 5 years working as a nurse, and then I couldn't afford to pay the bills because we were having our first son, and so I joined the prison service and spent 19 years working my way up the ladder of the prison service. And somewhere in all of that is our church journey of 23 years in a congregational evangelical church. Solid foundation, closet charismatics. You could speak in tongues, but only in a closet, basically. That was truth. But good sound, solid foundation. Toronto happened. I'm just giving you headlines. Toronto happened, messed up our lives. We started traveling into London. I took a day off every month just to go to a midweek meeting where God showed up. So we used to go to wherever God was. As a result of that, we went to a Randy Clark conference in 1995, changed churches. Through that church, got connected with Bethel. Sue visited Bethel. My wife visited Bethel in 1999. Came home and said, this will be our home. I didn't realize she meant that Bethel would be our home, because sometimes felt like I lived there. I spent a lot of hours in there, but it was wonderful. And then in 2001, I quit my job, and we sold up, and we jumped on a plane 4 days after 9/11 and went to Bethel. Never dreamed that it would be 15 years, never dreamed I would end up on the senior team, and certainly never dreamed that I would do what I get to do. And those are a few headlines. There's a whole load of other stuff in there. Yeah. So what to talk about to a room full of leaders. So I'm gonna have a go at painting a couple of pictures. Like the worship made me want to just kind of preach fire and brimstone or something, but I don't think you came for that. So, not the bad fire and brimstone, like the real fire. In actual fact, I think that there is something significant around the subject of specifically fire. I'm going to backtrack. I'm going to go somewhere I'll go there just for a minute. October, I think it was, I went to a conference in Sunderland. Was anyone there by any chance? Paul Cain came over. Now, I've not met Paul Cain before that event. I've known of him. In fact, I first heard him speak in 1991 at the Holiness Conference at Docklands Arena with John Wimber and Mike Bickle and a few other people. I heard him give a prophetic word at that conference, a prophetic word that I never dreamed what I would call walk that public prophetic word would become my personal prophetic word. That prophetic word was that God was drawing a line between Germany, the United Kingdom, and I think Paul Cain said California or America. It matters not. I'm not going to give you the details of why I've walked that line. But when I was invited to speak at a conference in Sunderland with Paul Cain, the answer was yes. Now, there's stuff along Paul Cain's journey. There's different things that are around him. But this is a man whose life has been preserved by God. He had a miraculous birth. He has a miraculous life. And I'm not really interested if there are a few things along the way. I know there's something on his life, so I wanted to be there. And when he stood to speak, and he's in his 80s now, he's not that well. But he was there, and I just wanted to be there. I wanted to be there because God had preserved his life. There's an incredible prophetic story about how he's preserved his life, and he knew that he would speak in 2017 in Sunderland in an Elim church, and he knew that 30 years ago. And that's pretty remarkable. I wouldn't mind a prophetic word that says where I'm going to be in my late 80s. I'll take that, Although actually God did tell me that 10 years ago, he told me I had 40 more years, so I'm good. And he gave me a sign of that, actually, that my mother would have 10 more years and I would have 40 more years. And my mother is still alive, and she's 95, so I'm kind of good with that. Anyway, Paul Cain said there's going to be an unprecedented move of God in this country in Europe. He felt like that's what he came to tell us. He used this word unprecedented, and then he started talking about the match is lit. He felt that he said the match is lit. Now, parallel with this, David Chambers, who's with me, spiritual son. I don't tend to have very many spiritual sons because I have natural sons. So I've always been careful about saying I have lots of spiritual sons because I never want my sons to feel less than. And that's really important to me. But David knows both my boys, and he's very much a spiritual son. He was in London because he works for Reinhard Bonnke's organisation. He was in London when I was in Sunderland. And he was with some guys, Daniel Calendar and another guy called Scott Lee, in London, getting ready for the fire conference. Anyone go to that? So thank him for organising it because that was down to him. So he's getting ready for the fire conference. Daniel Calendar is a friend of mine, so there's a connection. Well, they were sitting in a hotel, and Scott Lee had this word, and the word was that the wave had kind of hit the shore of this country 3 times, and there were 3 marks of the wave. But then a massive wave came and sort of wrote the sand, washed out those 3 waves. He then, a few moments later, felt that the building shook, and then he had a vision of Paul Cain walking into the hotel. They don't know that Paul Cain's in the country. So David and Daniel contact me and call me and tell me that this story that's going on, and then Paul Cain starts talking about an unprecedented move of God. Why am I telling you this? The match got lit in Sunderland. It's not about a person, it's about a desire of God. my interpretation of the waves is this. We have benefited from waves in this country. We're incredible at catching waves. And we might not surf very well, but we catch waves really well. And you can go back, and there are many examples of this, but I would go back to the Fort Lauderdale Five, people like Derek Prince, a massive wave that hit this country. We then see Wimber, a wave that hit this country. We then see Toronto, Randy Clark, a wave that hit this country. We then see Bill Johnson, a wave that hit this country. Here's my question. What are we going to do? Are we going to just sit and wait for the next wave and see who comes, or are we going to start a wave and start a fire? I believe the match is lit. And you can kind of feel it in this room, actually. It's like the match is lit. It's time for an unprecedented move of God. It's time for an unprecedented outpouring. And I believe with all my heart it's our time. I believe it's Europe's time with all my heart. I just do. Everywhere I go, people say the same thing. I love what we've seen. I love America. I love Bethel. I've been to Toronto. I've been to Pensacola. I didn't go to Lakeland. I've been one of those hungry guys. I've looked for every wave, and when I worked in the prison service, I tried to get hold of everything, to either catch a wave or catch the fire. Either of those phrases. But I feel like it's time that we didn't catch a wave or catch a fire, but we started a wave and started a fire. And that's where I kind of feel like that's the foundation of where I am at the beginning of this year. So I want to just kind of paint a picture of what I think is going on. See, as soon as, it was funny because Paul Cain, I think 3 times in his there's going to be a revival, use the word unprecedented. And then I have my notes to preach my message, which I don't always preach out of notes, but my notes have unprecedented all the way through. And I do believe we live in an unprecedented, in other words, a season of history that has never happened before. It's unprecedented. So let me paint a picture, your leaders. So can everyone see this okay? Is that roughly okay? You might struggle over there. All right. So I work with quadrants. Jesus did too, so it's okay. 3 of you got that. It's a cross. Depends whether you were looking at the space or the lines. It's all about that, you know. I want to just look at the world in which we live. Now, you come from a whole range of careers, life experience, jobs, what you do for a living, etc., which I love, without any question. I want to just have a look with you at the world, the church, the people, and the way we express our beliefs in God. Because all of these are in change, massive change. I don't know how many of you would be aware of this. And what I'm going to try and do is either, as I wrap up this morning, or somewhere this afternoon, which I'll do in a way that people who didn't get this are okay, is connect you to what's happening in the world. And out of that, hopefully show you the value of your place right here, right now. So let's just have, I'll use another piece, then I might write a bit tidy. Let's start with the world. Some of you will be familiar, and some of this message I've used before, and I wrap it around the verse, Esther 4:14. How many of you have got a prophetic word out of Esther 4:14, that you've attained royalty for such a time as this? A few of you. It's a very commonly given word, but the word demands a question. Because if you've attained royalty for such a time as this, what time is it? Now, in Bible times, wise people understood the times. One of the problems I think we have is we let other people tell us what time it is. So we let, the philosophers and the sociologists and the media and the finance people tell us what time it is. And Jesus rebuked the disciples. He said, you understand red sky at night, shepherd's delight. He didn't quite say that, but that's what he meant. But you don't understand the spiritual signs. The sons of Issachar, 1 Chronicles 12:32, understood the times and knew what to do. So wisdom, there's a connection between understanding the times and wisdom. So let's just have a quick look. We live in the days of the greatest opportunity. Now, it's unprecedented. If you're in your 70s, you have seen a tripling of the Earth's population in your lifetime. You really have, because somewhere between the 1920s and the 1960s, we went from 2 to 3 billion, which means we passed the 2.3 billion, multiply that by 7 billion, and we passed 7 billion in 2012. A tripling of the Earth's population. Unprecedented. Since Adam and Eve went from 2 to 6, unprecedented. Never happened before. What does that tell us? It tells us that something happened? Oh, guitar falling over. That's the effect I have on musical instruments, actually, yeah. They run away from me, yeah. I've tried guitar, violin, drums and piano. All those teachers left me notes saying, can't do it. Anyway, but I've raised a son who's a great musician, so that's all right. Wonderful. What does that tell us? It tells us that there's population increase. What are we doing about it in the church? If you're in the corporate world, some of you might even be involved in this, of studying population increase, population migration. You will understand, if you've been studying that when the Earth's population was 3 billion, 30% lived in cities. That's 1.5, have I got this right? No. 1 billion. We are now 7 billion and 50% live in cities. That's 3.5 billion. The corporate world's studying it. They're studying population growth, increase, migration. Are we? Or are we just going, oh, woe is us, the Muslims are taking over Europe? Instead of going, oh, hold on a minute. If that's happening, what should we do? So population is significant, but it tells me something else. It is an invitation to revival. Because of sheer numbers. There will be 1 billion under 15-year-olds on the planet in 15 years' time, because the next billion will take between 12 to 15 years to happen. This is staggering to me. It's like, I love those kind of statistics. So what do we do about it? Well, we live in the days of the greatest opportunity. I'll just say that it is an invitation to revival. And revival is when ones to millions of people come into a personal relationship with Jesus Christ, his person, his power, his presence, and his principles. Revival. Sheer numbers coming in to the kingdom. There are other messages I have, but that tells me something. It's time that we raised up the evangelists. It's time that we truly honoured and recognised the evangelists, particularly in the local church. It's time that we allowed them to sit at the government table, to have an influence over what we do. It's time that we release them to do their job and not carry the burden of all soul winning being in a city down to the evangelist, but that they equip the saints for the work of ministry. That is an invitation. I've got 16 of these points, so I'm going to hit them, because if you notice, there were 4 quadrants, and in each quadrant there are 4, okay? All right. But you're so awake here on Bishop Stortford, you'll be fine. So opportunity, change. In case you hadn't noticed it, we live in the great days, the greatest change. That iPhone that you're playing with now, I mean, it's ridiculous what it can do, and any other phone. Like, our lives are wrapped up in these things, but that's really just a small part of what's going on. The sheer pace of change, but not only the pace of change, the appetite for it. You see, many of us in the church, certainly those of my sort of age and generation, went to churches where we said, we've always done it that way. That was it. You know, Jesus, yesterday, today, forever, Jesus is the same, so why should we change? Like, we missed a point somewhere. We're meant to be changed to be like him. There is an appetite for change. Our grandparents bought one washing machine for life. Like, we buy one every couple of years because there's something new on it that it can do. You know, you can control it from your iPhone. I better have one of those, kind of a thing. Not me, because I avoid the laundry. I cook a lot, but laundry I've left alone. Don't even call it laundry here, do you? I went very American, didn't I? I went very American. Anyway, live days of unprecedented change. The pace of change. The appetite for change. The hunger for change. You know, I mean, we buy the next phone even though we haven't worked out how the last one worked. And even just, it's humorous now to even just stop and tell a generation, some of you there, that there was a day when if somebody wanted to talk to us on the phone, we had to be at home. And if we wanted to watch a TV program, we had to be at home. So there is a whole generation who never watched Wednesday night television in the church because we were all at church. I mean, that was our world. I mean, it's crazy when you think about it. You wanted to watch a new film that came out. You had to go and watch it at the cinema or wait 5 years for it to be on at Christmas. Like, really, that was the real life. But now we live in the days of the greatest change, unprecedented change. And that for me is an invitation to reformation. And reformation, my definition, I don't know whether anyone's going to take it as the definition, I don't really care, but reformation is when the whole of society comes under the influence of the person, the principles, and the presence of Jesus Christ, regardless of relationship with him. In other words, when we see the influence of Judeo-Christian values being raised to the top because they're there. They see the whole of everything we do, especially education, healthcare, government, social work. Those areas are absolutely dripping and business with kingdom principles. But they've got a little bit lost and they need lifting back up. So change equals reformation. And so there will be people in here, school teachers, government leaders, healthcare professionals, mums, who you're in the business of reformation. And it's time for us to really recognize those. Often, I'll tell you who they are in the local church. They're often the ones that, especially if you have set up, tear down church, you're doing that. You're the pillars of the church. You're the ones who've been giving for 20, 30 years, working hard in the town, the city, in areas of the law and of justice and education and healthcare, establishing foundations for society, but often not felt valued in the church. Because the young bucks with, the revivalists come along, or the ones with a title in the church, and you've been working hard all these years, the elder brother. And if I was preaching another message, I would minister to you and say, if that's you, you need to hear what the Father says to the elder brother. I've always been with you, and everything I have is yours. Therefore, it's reformation. Invitation to reformation. Is everyone okay? I'm a fast speaker, but I got a lot to say, so... Creativity. We live in the days of the greatest access to creativity. No longer do you have to rent a studio to record your next album. You can do it at home with some equipment that is reasonably easy to buy. You can make a movie of me today if you like. You can write stuff on a little movie that you just made. You can do crazy stuff. Access to creativity. If you know what you're doing, you could be sitting there with an iPad with, a CAD program on it and design your next house that you want to live in. I mean, the things you can do that there is, there are now, you can do scans. I mean, you can literally get a scanner that plugs into your iPhone that does, an ultrasound scan. I mean, crazy era of creativity that we live in, the things that we can do. What is that? I believe that is an invitation to a renaissance or a renaissance, because I'm confused because I've lived somewhere else and all that kind of stuff. And a renaissance is when there is a fresh discovery of creativity and inventiveness which is used to bring glory to God. So this is the days in which we live, and we also live in the days of extraordinary geopolitical changes. You've only got to look at what's happening around the world, some of the elections in Europe, of course, Brexit, and let's not mention what happened the other side of the pond, because I don't want to spoil your morning. But we live in days of extraordinary geopolitical changes. Here's what I think that is an invitation for nations to discover their identity and for the restoration of the true purposes of government. And I'm not going to go into that, but I believe there is an invitation for us to get back into calling out the identity of nations, because it gets shrouded with all the political junk, and for us to get involved in government. And I'm not going to go any further on that. So, The world. Is everyone okay? That's the world we live in. You might not have thought about it this way, but that's what's happening in our world right here, right now. Unprecedented opportunity, unprecedented change, unprecedented access to creativity, unprecedented geopolitical changes in the world. But every one of them is an invitation for us, the bride of Christ, to rise up and do something, to get involved. And that's why some of you are getting so excited and hungry about what's going on. And then we have the church. And once again, let's keep it simple and go quadrant. And I can draw circles as well, but this is the way my brain is wired to some extent. Let's have a look. There are some shifts in church. And I'll just narrow them down to 4, but I'll keep them relatively simple. The first one of those is a shift from a pastoral to an apostolic mindset. Now, let's just do a quick little bit of work on that. Your leaders in the room. How many of you in here are apostolic? All right. We better deal with that then. I think we had 3. We managed 3. I didn't ask you what you think I asked you. I asked you if you're apostolic. I believe that apostolic is a mindset which is derived from coming under the influence of an apostle. And the very word apostle means to be sent. Now, Jesus is the first apostle. He was sent from heaven to earth with an assignment. Bring heaven to earth. He taught us an apostolic prayer. Pray on earth as it is in heaven. That's an apostolic prayer. Every one of you has an apostolic assignment. See, I didn't ask you if you were apostles. I asked you if you were apostolic. Nobody has any trouble with this. If I said how many of you are pastoral, you'd have all probably said I'm pastoral. But you're not all pastors. If I'd said, are you prophetic? Many of you would have said, yeah, I'm prophetic, but you're not prophets. You're evangelistic, yeah, but you're not evangelists. Teacheric, which I think should be the word. But if I'd said how many of you are teacheric, you'd have said, yeah, we all lead little Bible studies. We can teach, we can do that kind of stuff. But you're not all teachers. But when I say, are you apostolic? All of a sudden, for some reason, the wheels grind to a halt and we go, oh no, I'm not that. No, you are, because you come under the influence, the teaching of an apostle. Now, whether you found your apostle on earth is not the issue. You found your apostle, his name is Jesus. If you do what he did, say what he says, believe what he believes, you're apostolic. So there's a shift, you see. We've shifted from pastoral, which is gathering, to apostolic, which is sending. And that's why today is happening. It's fundamentally that you have an apostolic mindset in the leadership of this church. It's apostolic. Now, the problem is the apostolic's been abused. It gets associated with hierarchical leadership and stuff like that. That's a mistake. But what we shouldn't do is abandon the apostolic assignment because there's been misuse. So there is a shift, big shift. Lots of things about it. You've probably shifted, as many churches have, from the sort of more midweek Bible study to a more midweek equipping, sending type of thinking. That's happening in widespread ways. But there are many others. You see, if you're gathering, you have a different mindset. Your leaders are gathering. They're famous for the number of people they gather. But once you become apostolic, you become famous for the number of people you send. See, many people, I don't ever want to point at the people involved in it, but I was the deputy governor of Feltham at one stage. That's a pretty significant prison 5 miles down the road from the church I went to. But I was only recognised in the church for the time I spent in the church, the title I carried in the church, and the tithe I put in the bucket. Nobody ever valued me that I spent 75, 80 hours a week running the largest... Well, really was running it because the number twos run places. If you're a number 2, you run it. Don't be in, and that's the truth. But that's what I did. I mean, the Home Secretary knew me by name. Nobody in the church world knew me. That's fine. But the thing was, I wasn't valued in the local church. The biography that I'll never write will be called I Never Made Deacon. I didn't. I never made deacon. I didn't even make it to a ballot for deacon. I was never even nominated to be deacon. But I'm doing what I did in the world. See, there's a shift. I was in a church that had a pastoral mindset. Your contribution to the church is what you do in the church, not what you do outside of the church. So this is a huge shift. This is very related to, well, nearly everything is related to this, but this is really related to culture, because you'll have a different culture. My mother still goes to that church, and it's great, and they've loved her, and she's done an incredible job there. But my mother still goes in on a Monday and fills in a register from the people who filled in the cards on Sunday to say they've been at church. That's a pastoral mindset. Like, where are you? We need to make sure that you were there because we need to pastor you. Is that everyone with me? Some of you been to that church? All right, all one like it. So, huge shift, massive shift. We've also got a shift, and your language says that you're doing this, and that is the shift from church to kingdom. And, you know, you've quoted even the verse. It's amazing, isn't it? Jesus said, I'll build my church, and the Father will give you the keys to the kingdom. It's kind of funny, really, because we've been trying to do something that Jesus said he would do and failed to pick up the keys to what the Father asked us to do. I believe if we pick up the keys, we'll get church. I just believe we will. But so there's this clear shift that the emphasis is shifting from church to kingdom. I think Chris Valentin says it probably best, not all of the kingdoms in the church, but all of the churches in the kingdom. If you focus on kingdom, you'll get church. Some people get a little bit hung up when we start talking even about the gospel of the kingdom versus the gospel of salvation. The gospel of salvation is in the gospel of the kingdom, but not all of the kingdom is in the gospel of salvation. So we need to be conscious that Jesus talked about the gospel of the kingdom. The kingdom's at hand. He did talk about the gospel of salvation too, of course, I get that. But kingdom. So huge shift that we have here. One of my favorites is that we're shifting from an emphasis on big churches to big people. Big churches don't change cities. Big people do. So this is an emphasis. There are other things wrapped up in here. Things like the man of God to the priesthood of all believers. Where again, language I've heard here today, you're all priests. We're a kingdom of priests. So this is a big shift. And there are many others I could go, but we've shifted very much from going to church and from going to heaven to becoming the church and bringing heaven to earth. These are shifts in probably in recent years, but they affect every one of us in what our response is. So that's the church. People. Let's have a quick look at that. People in the church. They're here. There probably never been in the history of mankind 4 distinct generations alive at the same time. Ages, yes. But not what we're experiencing today, because what have we got today? We've got traditionalists alive today. They've sort of born somewhere, end of Second World War, around there. Then we got the baby boomers, the children of the traditionalists. And then, depending on how you want to do it, but you've got Gen X and Gen Y, and some would call those millennials. These 4 groups of people live differently, completely differently. These people here, they were loyal to their organization or their nation. These are loyal to their friends. It really is a massive, massive shift in how we think. I mean, this group here contain people who work at stand-up desks in places like Google and Apple, have baristas on duty who work from 9 at night till 4 in the morning, who take breaks for creativity and play pool and ping pong or whatever it is. Really, there are people alive today that work like that. I'm old school, it's weird because it's a while now, but I still think civil servant. It's like, I'm still in that mode. These people here, we were like, well, I'll work in a team if I have to. These are, maybe team's a good idea. I have to be in a team. I have to have fun in my team. They're all in your church at the same time. Literally, this is the diversity that we're working with. Don't worry about ethnic diversity. That's another subject. We have diversity just in the room, in the way that we do life as people. So what does this equate to? I believe that this is an invitation, a very strong invitation to being secure in who we are, but working for a united bride. In other words, bringing our individual approach and working alongside other people. I believe it's a really strong invitation. And again, understanding where you are in this. See, if you jump back, what you start to do is you start to trace something. You might go, oh, I'm one of these. It's Reformation. That's where I fit on here. And then you start going, okay, what's really affecting me? Oh, it's this. It's kingdom. I've got a kingdom assignment. And then maybe you find yourself down here that you're a millennial, Gen Y. And then you start to see some threads. Now, the way that a Gen Y will express Reformation and church to kingdom is different from the way a baby boomer's going to express that. But they're on the same track. Does this make sense? And then how do we express our beliefs in God? This is a complete steal from Bill Johnson. Make no apology for it. Although I do have the email that confirms that I put some of this together for him. So that was kind of nice. Because I heard him teach two separate messages and then he brought them together. In between those two events was an email from me that said, do you realize these are all connected? So anyway, he did acknowledge it once. So I've got the email. I'll keep it forever. But it begins with this. Now, these are different ways that we express our belief in God. Number one, God is good. He's good. Now, it's one of those things that Revelation, is anyone else suffering this way? Revelation is weird because you get a revelation, then as soon as you get it, you think everyone else must have already got it because it's so simple. Does anyone else have that problem? I definitely do. I stand up preaching. I'm sure everybody knows this, but it's not usually true. So God is good. The Bible's full that God is good. For years we said God's good. I can remember being in my evangelical congregational church, screaming, God's good, devil is bad. You know what I mean? It's like, it's not new, but the real guts of it, penetrating every area, every corner of our lives is. And God is good means that we dream big. He's good, so we dream big. This is really important for us Brits. Really important for us Brits. Americans don't have any trouble with that. Why don't they have any trouble with that? Do you know why? What's the British dream? We don't have one. The Americans have an American dream. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's like in their DNA is dream. So we've got a step to take. It's like, I describe it this way. If you go to America, and I'm not talking about prosperity gospel. I'm just talking about people preaching about wealth. I tell you that often creates a problem. Tell you why it creates a problem. Because there are 3 steps that have to be taken on the journey from poverty to wealth. There's poverty. But going from poverty to wealth is too big a jump. So you have to go from poverty to believe in a debt-free God to then step into wealth. It's the same, I think, with dreaming. So we hear the dream and we're going, well, that's too big a leap. But if we can actually realize, okay, we don't have a dream. How do we get to don't have a dream to dream big? Well, we have to realize in between those two that our God is a giver of dreams. Now, once you realize he's a giver of dreams, you've shifted. Because you might not have a dream, but you're in a relationship with a God who's the giver of dreams, which means now I can dream big. Does this make sense? And so we have to shift our thinking. So our problem, I think, one of our problems is we don't have a dream to start with. We don't have that foundation in our our default isn't dream. So we need to shift that. And once we shift that, then we can start to dream big. So God's good, which means we dream big. And then nothing is impossible. Now, again, it's in the Bible. With God, nothing is impossible. It's in the book. But it hasn't been the way that we've expressed our beliefs about God. We've had this sort of, especially if you mix it with, well, God's good, but he sent me cancer to teach me a lesson. That's our thinking. I mean, that's some of our thinking. It's been there. And, we've had a God who sends bad stuff that the insurance brokers confirm because you have acts of God in your insurance policy. You're not going to get paid out for that because that's God's fault. It's an act of God. These things have permeated our thinking and our society and the way we do things. So these things are very significant shifts. So nothing is impossible, which means what? We take risks. Gosh, the Americans are really good at taking risks. We're not so good at taking risks. Why? They have a risk-taking entrepreneurial culture. It runs through every part of their society. So once again, we've got to go, okay, how do I get from there to being a risk taker? How do I get there? Well, the key here is that we put in the middle of it when nothing's impossible. And so this changes the way we live. This changed the way we live. I live with dreams now that I wouldn't even have thought about having the dreams that I live with now. So, one of the craziest parts of my journey is this part where I preached in some stadiums now. I never, ever, it wasn't that they weren't in my wildest dreams. They were outside that. But that changed. So in that, because he's given me the dream, and I start to realize nothing's impossible, I step into that and take risks. I'm not responsible for the fall. I am responsible for the step that I take. The very keys, what's fascinating as well is the very keys to the Christian life are wrapped up in, hope isn't wrapped up in, I've just won the lottery. It's wrapped up in, I haven't got a clue what's going on. I'm in a wilderness. I'm tangled up. I do not know. That's where hope is most manifest. Love isn't most manifest on your honeymoon night. It's manifested in the presence of your enemies. That's when the full manifestation of love is. And faith isn't manifested when you've just seen the blind eye open. Faith's manifested when you stand in front of the impossible and declare what God said. And I think we've often been waiting because we don't take the risk. So we're kind of waiting for more evidence before we step out. I've just been, a couple of people I told, already here, but in the last year, I've seen 3 children with Down syndrome have significant breakthrough in the area of swallowing and speech. Now, I stand in front of these families, and it's like, I don't want to create false hope. But false hope's a lie anyway, because there's no such thing. Because there's no hope in hell. So it doesn't exist. And hope doesn't disappoint. And hope not disappointing isn't that you didn't get what you hoped for. It's not about that at all. So hope, it is impossible to disappoint. But I stand in front of families. I'm filled with love, I'm filled with hope, and I'm filled with faith. Not because it's already happened, but that makes you nervous. And I don't know if there's anyone here today, and I must make sure that I pray for this today, but my wife and I have an assignment to pray for infertility. And we have an extraordinary degree of confidence as we pray for that now. We have this history behind us of testimonies, my wife's personal testimony, but every time I stand in front of somebody, although I'm pulling on that authority, I'm pulling on that testimony, I am standing in that place. This is another risk. It's another place of risk. But nothing's impossible, so we take risk. This changes the way we live. And then Jesus has won absolute victory. And so we trust God. And to be honest, we culturally, I think, we tend to be more responsible. We take real high responsibility. Our culture is responsibility. We put things in place that actually, I think there's been a tendency for us to trust what we do a little bit more than what God's done. And that's shifting. So at one level, I love our responsibility. So, I mean, I use the example, I've used it all the time, of the air crash that happened over a road, and because of one person dying, or however many it wasn't many, I think it was one. One person dies, we change legislation. To be honest, hundreds of people die in America, but they don't change legislation. We have this responsibility thing. It's really good, it's really healthy, but sometimes it gets in the way because we'll tend to trust what we can do more than trust God. So it changes the way we live. And then we are significant. And what's the linking word of that is that we serve well. Now, we've tended at times, I'm not saying we always have, but we have tended at times to be we're nothing. We're just, should be trodden in the ground. We're nothing. We're just sinners saved by God, But that's not true. We are significant. It is this amazing thing that, God has chosen to do things with us. I always use Moses. I think Moses is the great example. Moses stands in front of a Red Sea, holds up a rod, and the Red Sea parts. Yeah? Why didn't he tell Moses to go and stand in the middle of the wilderness and raise the same rod and let the tabernacle appear? Because he could have done, but he didn't. He chose to co-labor with us. He chose to work with us. And I think this is really important. It links in lots of ways. But, if you look at the person that's working wherever, in the marketplace, in the hospital, in the school, in government, we have tended to have a message that says, well, we love you and we appreciate what you do, and we're really glad you earn a ton of money because you put more in the bucket than other people do, but we haven't gone to, you're actually really significant. You're really valuable. We absolutely need you to be working in that wherever, mayor's office or hospital. The fact that I stood up in Bethel, what is now nearly 10 years ago, May the 2nd, 2008, and said surgery is not a second-class healing it's funny because at the time I didn't think it was that radical, but it clearly was. And it's a battleground. So now for me to spend my time saying to doctors, nurses, healthcare professionals, it's not second-class healing. Let's get that thing. So if you start seeing it, you have, supernatural healing's first class, and everything else is second class, which means that the doctor or nurse is now, what? A second-class healer, which probably means that there are second-class Christian. Well, this is terrible. What an effect that has on somebody who comes to church and worships on Sunday and is standing in the row thinking, well, I'm not quite as significant as the preacher who's got a great title and et cetera, yeah? So what I think you can start to see, maybe we'll just use the first diagram, is the connection between all of these. That you can start to see, okay, which one of those four is highlighted to you? Are you drawn to, the opportunity? And I actually don't think that revival should be limited just to the sort of like the supernatural revival. I think there are some people whose careers bring life where there's death and light where there's darkness. So maybe you're drawn to the opportunity. Maybe you're drawn to the change. Maybe it's reformation beating inside of you. Maybe you're drawn to the creativity. Maybe it's renaissance that's inside of you. Maybe you're drawn to get involved in these massive geopolitical changes. And then maybe what is it in the church that really you start to realize, I get it. That's why I've so often felt a bit uncomfortable in church, because I've got an apostolic mindset in a pastoral structure and in a pastoral culture. Or maybe you're thinking, why is everything changing around here? You like, my world's being shifted. I like this nice, tidy pastoral model where everything's predictable and it's being shaken up. Well, it gives you some insight into why things are changing. Or maybe the church kingdom piece, which is very closely related, but is another way of expressing it. Or maybe it's I get it, this big people. It really is about raising up big people. You will get a big church if you have big people. Don't worry about it, leaders. That's not an issue. You raise up big people, you will have a big church. But the lens isn't big church. The lens is big people. And then it's about bringing heaven to earth. It's about becoming the church. It's those kind of things. Or maybe down here, you can go, oh, that's me. I get it now. I get it why. It's kind of really different building a team these days. It's actually not as easy as it used to be. There seem to be a lot of diverse views. Well, these millennials, they, depending on who you read, but one of the best ways of working out who they are is they were teenagers at the turn of the century. That's one way, and there are other complications in there. But even just think of that. They have lived a completely different life experience. It is completely different life experience. I was talking to somebody recently about, restricting, children with iPhones and stuff like that. It's like, hold on a minute. It's not like protect them. It's actually remove the way they do life. Remove the way they communicate, do relationships, do community, find out what's going on. It's like that's their experience. So understanding this is really helpful. And then maybe, which one of those are you most drawn to? Which one is the real shift for you? They're all, of course, valuable. So all I'm trying to do is just to paint a picture. But the picture, I think, is an invitation for us to be incredibly hopeful. Incredibly hopeful. Because the world that we live in is offering us an invitation. It's offering us an invitation for revival. An invitation to bring reformation. There's such a hunger for change. There really is. That is an invitation for a true renaissance. Now, if you look historically, we have revivals that end, reformations that divide, and a renaissance that said we did it without God. So the invitation is a revival that never ends, a reformation that unites, and a renaissance that gives glory to God. And that we get back into the geopolitical arena. We've got to get back in there. To be honest, I think some of what's going on in America, and I have some pretty strong views about some of what some people say that I get very unhappy about. But actually, I think what's happened there is a hunger for change and a hunger for kingdom stuff in there. Now, it's shrouded and it's messy. But in there is that desire for some pro-life and a whole load of other stuff. So I think there is this incredible appetite and invitation for us to get into revival, reformation, renaissance, and get back into the geopolitical arena. The good news is the church is waking up. There's a shift. I was just with 380 Baptists this week, and it's like, gosh, you guys, you don't necessarily have the same language. Like I'm having to work much slower to talk. One guy came up to me and he says, this culture word, I've never heard that used in the context of the church ever. It's like, oh, okay. And then I did a seminar on closing worship, and somebody stood up and said, I have no idea what you're talking about. We do hymn prayer sandwich in our church. I don't know what you're talking about. Okay. But around that was, but we know something's up. We know we got to change. Help us change. It's incredibly exciting. So the church is waking up and shifting, understanding the people in it. And of course, we need all the generations. We need Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I wish there was a fourth in the sequence. It is if you go with the women, it's interesting because you've got Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. So maybe we should have gone with that. But anyway, being funny, obviously. But we need all three generations lined up and working together. We need each other. It's an invitation to unity. It's an invitation for us to understand each other, learn to work together. And the beliefs in God are causing us to live differently, to dream big, to take risks, to trust God, and to believe that we are significant enough to make a difference. So why don't you just stand up? It's coffee time, and you probably need some more of whatever it is you put in your coffee around here. It's fun being with you. It's a little bit difficult to come in after worship and teach seminarish stuff when you're so hungry. I feel like you go out on the streets and raise the dead the way you were during worship. It was incredible. Seriously, I'm confident in you. The atmosphere in here, the energy in here, the anticipation in here, the excitement in here is contagious. David and I were standing there going, this is contagious. I wouldn't be anywhere else this morning. Beautiful. So, Father, I pray, give us wisdom. I pray you give us personal wisdom. personal revelation. I pray for the gift that the sons of Issachar had to understand the times and to know what to do. We live in these great days. Thank you that you chose this time for us to be alive. You didn't choose for us to be with Elizabeth I or Henry VIII or anyone else. You chose right here, right now, this moment. And Father, I ask, give us the wisdom to be stewards, whether we're teenagers or in our 80s and 90s, wherever we are in that spectrum, give us the wisdom to know what to do so that we can mark this nation, this continent, this planet with the name of Jesus, I pray. Amen.